In 3, 2, 1. What's up, everybody? This is the Tea Time Podcast. Where you... Oh!
最後に約束しろ。
分かってるわ。
3, 2, 1. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Tea Time Podcast, where you don't necessarily need some tea to be drinking, but grab yourself a drink.
We're your hosts. I'm Lucas.
And I'm Amadeo. Today we have a special guest with us. We'll let him introduce himself.
I'm Joel, and I'm a friend of Amadeo and Lucas.
We're very, very pleased to have him on the show today. We're excited. First guest. Welcome.
First guest.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, our pleasure.
Thank you, Joel.
The one and only has graced us with his presence.
Man, I'm just happy to be in you guys' presence right now, really.
Mutual love. I love it.
Nice to see you guys.
You too, man.
So today we want to focus on relationships a little bit, but let's dive into the kind of relationship that we have with you. Like, what's going on with you, Joel? Who are you? How do we know you?
Take us back to the beginning.
I'll take it back all the way to day one.
Day one.
But no, we met in high school, both of us, all of us, we met in high school. We were in the academy together, so we had classes, like mutual classes, English and Spanish we were learning, Amadeo's learning Japanese. We just had we were more acquaintances, I'd say, is how our relationship started with both of us. Amadeo, I got closer to you probably senior year. We had an extra class together and we got close, and then we all went to school together, college of course, in freshman year.
Yeah.
Crazy times in the dorm, so
definitely
we all lived on the same dorm actually, freshman year of college, and so I think you guys were my neighbors. You guys
were next door.
Yeah, we were next. Me and Lucas were next door neighbors.
You guys were next door neighbors. I was 3 doors down.
Yeah, you're down the road, but it was all good times. And then obviously, I think college is when we our relationship got a lot stronger. Both of us, all of us.
Yeah.
And then now here we are.
Yeah.
Next chapter.
I think. Yeah, we were acquaintances, definitely in high school and stuff. I always thought oh man, Joel's too cool to be my friend. And then in college, I think that's when it really started coming together. We just kind of started seeing each other more often. It was just all right, yeah, clearly this is, high school is high school, but now we're going through college, more adult stuff, relying on each other, trusting each other, taking classes. And you kind of realize, I kind of had this idea that it's you know what, these people are going to be in my life for the rest of my life, whether they're going to be very present or I'll see them every once in a while, I feel like this friendship is pretty solidified,
Oh, definitely. What is I think there's a time limit which, however long a friendship lasts, it means I think it's 7 years, where if you've been friends for 7 years, then you're friends for life at that point,
Yeah.
Which I find important, You have to connect with so many people in this world, and it definitely changes your perspective moving forward in the world, especially in a time like now where, so many different relationships may be strained or actually, maybe even better.
Especially with social distancing and stuff. Yeah, keeping people apart or forcing people to be together all the time. Yeah. So it's crazy times though. But happy we're friends. Happy we're all friends.
Happy we are friends. I find it interesting because I remember the college days, at least when we were freshmen, and how all our bonds really started to grow, and how wild our floor was, honestly.
Yeah, a lot of bonding experiences for sure.
But going back to the importance of these relationships, I wouldn't become the person that I am now if I never had those moments with you guys or with all the other people that I've ever interacted with,
Yeah.
So let me pose this question to you. What do you find to be key in most of the relationships that you have? Friendship, romantic, acquaintances. I personally find that communication and like being present with somebody is a big key to having a relationship. Definitely communication as well. Like, you know, today I was talking to a lot of people for so many reasons, and our R&D director had a retirement party today, and we're working split shifts, so we have different people at different times in the R&D department.
Yeah.
So today I got to see everybody, which was cool because I haven't seen everybody for months. And like, you know, you forget what that feels like to be connected to those people. And I was just like, wow, there's one of my coworkers, his name is Connor, and I was having just like a real long conversation with him, and I was like, it's been a very long time since I've seen you, and I didn't realize how my engagement with you affected me, like, personally, you know?
Yeah.
Like almost you take it for granted.
Yeah, it's like, you know, with social distancing and everything, it kind of makes it more prominent to look at the relationships you have and how they're strengthened or weakened from certain events in the world, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like everything going on, it really changes the dynamic of your relationship with people, whether it be friend or family. And one of the things that I appreciate about different relationships that I've had is that even when you're spending time apart from those people, when you do link up with them, when you get to see them again, that that bond is still there, and it's almost like it never broken. So when you have such a strong bond with people, even when you're not seeing them all the time, you're not interacting with them on a daily basis, that bond's still being there. And so when you're talking about things that I value in a relationship, the communication for sure, but as well as, I would say for me, one huge thing is like the person being trustworthy. And I think that goes with people's loyalty. When you know that somebody has a certain loyalty to you and you can trust them, whether it be with like your own emotions or things you're going through, or just everyday things, just that you can trust them as a person, their character. I think that's something that has bonded me to people in my life, where even when I don't see them for a long time or talk to them all the time, that me knowing that they have that loyalty toward me, and me also knowing that I have that loyalty toward them, I think that's what's like really held my relationship strong with a lot of people.
Yeah, I feel that, and I think that loyalty is like definitely an important component. I think I was gonna say like self-sacrifice kind of, but in the sense that you don't put yourself first in the relationship, you put the other person. They're like, hey, you know, I care about this person, and the only reason I'm interacting with this person is because I want to be friends with them. You know, like if you're interacting with someone like a cashier, right, at the checkout,
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of have a relationship with them too, except it's client or customer and, you know, sales associate relationship. And so there you're not, you know, you're kind of putting yourself first because you're just like, hey, I need you to check me out so I can pay and then leave.
Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to be friends with you or anything like that. Nothing personal, it's business, as cliche as it sounds. But I remember, and you know, I can say this about both of you guys, but when I remember freshman year, I think we had like a chem test, and then you like came over, and it was like midnight or whatever, and like we stayed up to 3 a.m, and then Mouse was in the room too.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, Mom gave us a run for our money.
Houdini.
Yeah, man. He tore that whole dorm up. Like.
Yeah, for a week, dude. But the fact that we had a chem test, but like we had the same class, and it was an 8 a.m. class. Like we didn't go to sleep till like 3:30, 4 in the morning, but we stayed up. We weren't even studying for the test. We were just chatting, and I was like, I was okay paying the cost of sleep in order to have that experience with you. You know, I was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna, you know, I always say like sleep is for the dead, and like I can either prioritize myself and be kind of self-centered, be like, yo, I want to go to sleep, or I could be like, you know what, like, yeah, it's just a test, whatever, life keeps going on, I'm just gonna kick it with Joel. And so I think that is also kind of an important component, you know, like just kind of like that mutual respect, that loyalty, that communication.
I like where you're going with that though. I feel like it's that sacrifice, kind of like the trade-off between, putting somebody else before you is like a lot of love. Like it shows a lot of love in different
And that
relationships.
level of loyalty that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Have you ever like had a time where you had to decide what the cost of a relationship would be for you? You know, like trading off sleep. You know what I'm saying? Like, have you ever had one of those moments where you were like,
this trade-off's not worth it?
that trade-off isn't worth it, you know? I feel like there's been plenty of times where I've been,
Where you sacrifice too much.
yeah, is there ever a point where you can sacrifice too much, whether it be romantically, familial?
Absolutely.
Friendship.
In my own like opinion and experience, I feel like, and this is why I feel like it's the same for other people, but I can only speak for myself. And I feel like once you are compromising your own character or core beliefs, or you're sacrificing your own, like, let's say well-being, happiness, mental health even, like once you're sacrificing those things for whoever else, I think that's when the line needs to be drawn of like boundaries when it comes to relationship and how much time and energy you're giving anybody, whether it be your mom, friend, or like a romantic partner, just because I just feel like that's like a lesson that I had to learn, is that you are in control of who you give your energy to. You're in control of who you give your time to. And a lot of times people won't respect your the boundary that you decide to have for yourself, whether it be to better yourself or whatever those things may be. And so it's like, you have to make that decision. I know that I've had to make that decision, so I'm sure it's the same for a lot of other people, where you have to make a decision of, is this too much sacrifice? Because I think that relationships you shouldn't have to sacrifice yourself to keep a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
And, the dynamics of a healthy relationship and healthy attachment, I think, are very different from the dynamics of unhealthy relationships and unhealthy attachment. And, you just have to look out for where you're investing your time and your energy. And, like, relationships are that main source that you're going to be pouring into when it comes to focus.
Now, let me ask you guys this. What if, so you're talking about the sacrifices, once it, starts, I guess, like eroding at who you are, your character and stuff, that's when you should like draw the lines. But what if the person that you're sacrificing for, like what if it's not like constant, but they recognize it and like appreciate it and they like don't take it for granted. They realize like how much you are sacrificing for them.
Yeah.
Like, what if because some people just like take it for granted, you like sacrifice, and then you ask yourself like, hold up, like why am I doing this, But what if you're still sacrificing all that, but the other person is like, hey, I appreciate everything you're doing, I recognize how much of a toll it's taking on you, I just want you to know, like, I'm forever in your debt type of thing. Does that change it? Or do you still draw those boundaries?
Do you deem them worthy for your time? Do you deem them worthy for that sacrifice?
Yeah, like
for who you are. And I think that's a question you have to ask yourself, is who is this person to me and how much do I value the relationship with them? What do you think, Amadeo?
I think definitely you do have to come to terms with how much you value that relationship, It's like if you sacrifice something for your mom, You love your mom. One would hope most people would love her. One would hope, but
she's cool.
But nonetheless, you sacrifice so much for your mom. I mean, I know personally I've done a lot of sacrifice for my mother, but not out of spite or anything, just, out of the willingness of...
Because she's your mom,
She's my mom. I love her,
Yeah. You value the relationship.
I value that relationship, but I think when you do come across maybe a point, let's say if an acquaintance, like I would equate that to like maybe a homeless encounter, okay? Because I've had a couple. I once met a homeless man in the city, in Chicago, on the corner right next to Portillo's and like Rainforest Cafe, right? I sat there with him for a second and he's like, would you give me some food or would you give me some money? And I told him, we can go eat if you want. And I was like, the only thing that I ask of that is that you like tell me what your life's about. You know what I'm saying? So we went to go eat. We went to Portillo's. We go eat, and he tells me his life story and everything. But I was willing to sacrifice that regardless of that relationship. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think there are certain moments where, because he was appreciative of it. You know what I'm saying? He's like, I realize what you did. Because, like, not many people would do that.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for, like, listening to me because you didn't have to, you know what I'm saying? So I think in that, there's definitely a spectrum to which kind of things can be valued in certain relationships or even just encounters, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's where I stand with it. Relationship-wise, like, let's say, for a romantic partner, very much, like, depends, I value my relationship romantically.
Yeah.
I'll sacrifice so much, but at that point, yes, there has to be a boundary.
Yeah, I feel like if it starts becoming constant, then it's like, okay, cool. Like, I get that you appreciate it and you respect it and see what I'm doing, but at the same time, like, the sacrifice can't keep going forever because it's going to reach a point where you have nothing left to give. You know, you're just like completely empty. You're like this just drained me completely,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I think that's something you have to be cautious of, especially. Well, not especially. It really depends how you view like relationships and romance, but I do see it often that like people can be drained in their romantic relationships, and so I do think it's something that. You generally have to be cautious of because a lot of times your emotions and the dynamic of your relationship with whoever can really affect your perspective on what you're willing to sacrifice for them and how much energy you're willing to give them. And like you said, it can be draining. Like in any relationship can be draining. Like just if you don't have the energy or the focus for it, then it takes away from your own.
Mm-hmm.
So have you guys ever experienced a draining relationship then?
Absolutely. I can't give you any specific example off of that, but I know I've been drained in my life. Like there's been times in my life where and I don't think there's like anything, to me, no specific relationship I've had in my life stands out where I'm like, oh, this person was just draining. Like all the relationships that I've had, I feel like served their purpose and their time, and I was with those people because I cared about them at that time. And like at times though, because I do feel like it's something like a roller coaster. There's ups and downs, ebbs and flows, and like at certain times, I'm sure that I felt drained from like a romantic partner, and it's not something that's like an enjoyable experience to be a part of when you feel that.
Unlike the flip side of that, have you ever like, do you know like maybe some relationship off the top of your head where it was the opposite effect, where they like empowered you, like what I'm saying?
Oh, okay,
like,
yeah.
Had, like an empowering kind of energy to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like they're pouring into you more than anybody even draining each other. And yeah, I've experienced that too. And that's like a beautiful feeling to have of somebody giving you that support and somebody giving you, encouraging you. I think maybe better than like empower, but like encouraging you to better yourself or encouraging you to reach your goals or become a better you in any way.
So like,
and I try to give that energy to people that I'm with, right? Like I consciously try to give positive energy and encourage them so that I'm not a draining factor in their life, that they feel like I'm adding to their life. You know what I mean? Because
of equal or greater value.
Exactly, yeah. And that could really like change somebody's life if you give them that positive energy and that you give them support that they need.
Yeah.
Everybody just needs a little love.
Everybody
needs some support. Like
and those who say they don't need it a little bit extra,
Maybe just a little bit more. Just a little bit more.
Yeah.
How do you? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, I can't remember like a specific relationship that was like extremely draining because I think I would just been like, all right, I'm out, you know. But there has been times where I'm like, I have felt drained, and I think, looking back, I think part of me was to blame for it too because I didn't set those boundaries to begin with, and so the one person didn't know how much like they can take, but at the same time, I was like, okay, you know, I was putting too much emphasis on the relationship that I didn't need to, you know, like putting emphasis and like support and energy into the relationship is important, but I think, you know, adding like that extra doesn't like it the investment doesn't return, you know, on itself. And so like you need to recognize, I think I just need to recognize sometimes too that the level of the relationship and see like, okay, I'm okay at this level of like giving this much of myself to this relationship. I don't need to give more because like the relationship isn't necessarily going to improve. By giving this much, it doesn't mean it's going to be less because it's not my expectations or anything, you know?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But what were you
Very
saying?
true. No, you got to read the room. Like,
yeah, that's
and,
a good way to put it.
Yeah, and like relationships are fluid and they grow. They're not static, they're not stagnant. They're not just like you meet somebody and say, even if you're talking about like a romantic relationship, like you meet somebody, you're not as in love with them as you're going to be in, let's say you're hopefully in down the line, whatever it is, like hypothetically speaking. Yeah. And like, I hope your love isn't the same 1 year as it is 10 years that you're with that person. And so like you can't, you know, you don't go on the first date and, you know, start proposing and, you know, there's levels to it. You know, rip your heart out and just give it right to them. You know, you gotta
get on my sleeve.
There's levels to it, and I think you have to gauge it. And everybody does, whether they like realize it or not. They're like seeing how much they value the relationships and the people around them.
Yeah, because I mean, they're not set in stone. They're fluid, like what you said. They change and adjust with the days and times, and
I was gonna ask if you had any thoughts on like a draining relationship versus a relationship that empowers you. If you had any like thoughts on the dynamic of it or
I kind of
experience it.
So let's see. I guess when I look back at when I think of draining, I think of just I guess particular moments, but I could talk about like my past romantic relationships, if anything. I don't think at any point any one of them was really draining. I think what I was doing in those present moments was draining, you know. But then you know, like in retrospect, when you actually look at the relationships that you've been in, I realized that there were aspects that were drained. You know, I believe like my previous relationship. What was drained of me from them, I guess, is not my energy, but my effort and my creativity almost. I felt like I lost that part of me at one point, and I didn't realize that I did until, you know, it was all said and done. And I don't truly believe it was her fault, but the lack of reciprocation for that positive energy, which, you know, almost trying to invigorate somebody else was like, you know, that's draining in itself. And which at, you know, at some point I realized what I was doing, and that was like my own fault. I was draining myself at that point. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it was your own doing, and like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's because of like what you gauged at that time you thought was necessary, and like in retrospect you're like, okay, I could have handled that situation differently, or you know,
kind of like recognize the signs or read the room.
Definitely like reading the room, and I guess signals. Like, I guess, you know, you want to say that you're in love or infatuated of some sort of, you know, and that like that's very blinding in itself. Regardless of how long you've been with somebody, sometimes, you know, you can meet somebody and know them for a a year and be like, wow, you know, I feel like I've known you for 10, and you could be with somebody for 4 years and be like, wow, you're like a stranger. You know what I'm saying? So I think at one point that's how it became for me. It was like, yo, I've known you for so long, but I almost don't know myself anymore. So it's like,
yeah.
So like recognizing that and improving from that is self-invigorating, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Kind of like what you said, you just like sacrifice and it takes away from like your character and who you are, and then you end up not recognizing yourself.
Yeah, I found that I had to get back to like certain values that I had, and I was just like, why did I stop? You know, like was the cost worth, you know, everything? Was it, you know, the reevaluation of everything is very enlightening.
Oh yeah.
It's very enlightening, and when you can let go of those things and like forgive yourself for becoming something that you never were, I guess, or becoming less than you aspired to achieve, you know.
Yeah.
Then, you know.
Yeah.
What I think is kind of interesting is like in families and familial relationships, I think that sometimes people, it's a relationship that's forced on you, right? Like you don't choose the family you're with.
Yeah.
You don't choose how your parents are. You're just kind of born into it, right? And some people have rocky relationships with their parents, but they still maintain them, right?
Yeah.
Even though, you know, maybe you guys don't see eye to eye on pretty much anything. Maybe you rarely talk. Maybe, you know, you share nothing in common, and so there's just like friction or tension or just distance and like a big gap in those relationships. But you still maintain them, and it's funny because by doing so, it's almost, you know, draining in and of itself, because you're like, I'm maintaining this relationship, but I'm not necessarily getting out of like anything out of it, you know. Like, yes, they provide housing, but I'm not necessarily talking about like the physical needs, but like the emotional ones, you know, because when it comes to housing, once you're like old enough to be making your own money, you can always just move out and get a job and, you know, distance yourself from that and fill in those physical needs to keep yourself alive. You can do that on your own, but by choosing to be like, okay, these are my parents, and sticking with it, it's interesting because I think, you know, culture, society, but just maybe like the way of life too, you know, how humans are naturally, like it's almost like a given that like, okay, these are your parents and you have to respect them and take care of them, they take care of you, like regardless of, you know, whether you guys talk to each other or not, you have to have that loyalty, right? Like it's not even demanded, it's just expected, right? And that's interesting because the people that do have negative relationships with their parents, I feel like they, you know, just like if they think about their relationships or they're like at home and like, are those people drained constantly, you know? But they're like, okay, I'm gonna forego the whole being drained and not think about it because like these are my parents, I need to respect them, and like that's the standard, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but
I did have a thought on that. So, you know, at some point, let's say those relationships are forced upon you. They're just given natural relationships that you didn't ask for. Let's just put it that way.
Forced might be kind of a hard
yeah, that's like
line,
that's a hard word to like really accept. You weren't forced upon them, you know.
Yeah.
It was
you're just born into them.
You're born into your family, you know. Let's say your family, you grow up not knowing any difference from what's right and what's wrong emotionally until you become like emotionally mature enough to understand what's right and what's wrong. And let's say that you've come to the conclusion that your familial ties are detrimental to your growth as a human. What do you do, or where do you draw the line in saying, yes, this relationship is important to me because of the familial ties, but the detriment to my health and my well-being, is that more important, or is is the relationship more important? Do you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying, and my thoughts to that are, in that case, how much do you value yourself? And how much do you value the relationship with yourself, right? And even talking about like relationships, I've been thinking, I'm like, yeah, one of the things about relationships is that it really does start with yourself. And what I've seen is that when you don't have an accurate gauge of your worth, and you don't have a good picture of your own self-worth or whatever, maybe the view is skewed, your relationships with others is going to be just pretty much chaotic because you don't even have a good relationship with yourself. And so like, to me, and these are things that like I feel like I've had a lot of experiences with, like in general, is like those thoughts of, okay, like yeah, I have this relationship and even like a familial tie, and I'm very loyal to this person or these ties, but is this a detriment to my own moral compass and my own values, my own value system, or is this like it doesn't have to be benefiting, it's more so when it's a detriment to me in any way, is when I start trying to gauge and see like, okay, like is, because at the end of the day, it is your decision who you want to give your attention to and your loyalty and affection and time and all those things. And so it's like, if whoever it is doesn't value you in the sense that they should of what you know your own self-worth is, then like I don't think that you should give them the time of day no matter what the tie is, because they don't value you. And it is like a give-take relationship. It is a symbiotic relationship of like, there's the energy that you give, energy that you take, and like if they're not on the same page as you of your worth and what they value as, then I don't see anything wrong with cutting ties. Yeah,
You no matter how close you are, right?
Yeah.
Now, let me spin it this way, because you said you have to take into consideration like how much you value yourself and your relationship with yourself, right? So let's say the person you're talking about, like in this family tie, let's say it's someone as close as your parents, right?
Yeah.
And like they totally belittle you, push you off to the side, don't recognize your worth, right? And it's extremely detrimental to you.
Yeah.
Now, and you cut ties with them completely. Now, other people, not knowing your relationship, like maybe strangers or whatever, and they're like, oh, how are your parents? And you could be like, yeah, like I don't talk to my parents, like we don't have a good relationship, like we're not, I've distanced myself from them, right? Then those people might be like, dude, fuck this guy, he's an asshole son, he doesn't give a shit about his parents, right?
Yeah.
And so there goes your like public image, so to speak, right? And so I think that's kind of what I was getting at with like society and culture, that does the fear of how people might see you as a result of distancing yourself from family members keep you in those relationships? Like, is that fear greater than the sacrifice that you're giving, or like what you're sacrificing of yourself? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So I don't know, it's kind of
I think
like with that intersection.
I think to both your points, it's like more of a cross-sectional thing, because at one point, you have to define your worth, right? But at one point, let's say your worth was defined through your culture, through the ties that you weave through, what I'm saying? So separating yourself from that may be detriment, and actually knowing your worth. Like, let's say that the situation was that you knew your worth completely, but the detriments of the ties that you have are still like weighing on you, not only because you know your worth, but you know that you have value towards these people regardless, because you know your own worth. How do you cut that off? Not how, because I necessarily had to do that or have to, but
each situation is different too.
Yeah, but people experience that, and it's hard to, I guess, sometimes there may be fear for how society may view you, because, you're ingrained to, or, some cultures ingrained that, you have to respect your parents, you have to, not obey, but pay homage to where you came from.
Absolutely.
Loyalty is expected, not demanded.
So like, in that sense, you have full worth, full knowledge of your worth, but you can't cut ties. Maybe not because you fear for what the outside world may look at you as, but because your worth is somewhat tied to that, you know?
Yeah.
Which is, that's where I feel like the cross section, you know, where the conflict of knowing your worth and having those ties lie, you know? Because some people can straight up clean cut it off and not look back, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And some people can't clean cut it off, but that doesn't mean that they're still not invigorated through their own life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, like when someone like does clean cut it off, and you know that there's always that fear like, oh, what are people gonna think? I don't talk to my parents, like I distance myself, I cut them off. I feel like by worrying about that, you're already starting to sacrifice for relationships you don't even have, because these are like strangers, right? And so you're sacrificing yourself, like, oh, maybe I should be with my family because I don't want people to think I'm an evil person or like a bad son, right? And so you're sacrificing your well-being for a positive image with people you don't even know, whereas like people that are close to you are going to recognize that, like, hey, you made the right move by distancing yourself from your parents, you know? So I think that's, and sacrifices happen all the time now that I think about it, you know? Like,
yeah.
What I think is cool is that, like, as time progresses and society progresses beyond, like, the muddle of, like, you know, social chaos that we have now, at least, the emotional progressiveness towards oneself and like mental health and other such things that, you know, affect oneself have changed over time. So I was talking to somebody recently and they were like, you know, you don't ever really hear about serial killers anymore. And she's like, I wonder why. And then she kind of elicited like, is it because we're like...
She answered her own question.
Yeah, she answered her own question. Then you know, she like pointed to the idea that maybe because of the progressiveness of like being attentive to yourself emotionally has caused less serial killers, or we just don't care that much anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just find that like interesting and, you know, cool as relationships change and the times change. Like there's so much social progression and emotional progression
with like, you know, more like counseling and therapies becoming more mainstream and more like accepted and stuff. Yeah
as it should be. And it's actually, when you think about it, how we're still discovering all these new things in the mental health world, that all these interventions that we're putting in place now, if they're showing a great effect of like help with people and relief to their mental state, you think about, man, like this is what 21st century and all the people generations before us and like all the mental trauma that they've had, not dealt with, not spoken to a specialist about that could have helped them, or even had like access to medication that helps with mental health issues. It's
I mean, like think about all the, you know, back in France when there was like public executions with like a guillotine and stuff, you know, like there was no like, oh, this is rated R, where's your ticket, where's your parental supervisor, you know, just like the kids were roaming the streets and it's a nightmare.
Yeah, that's true. You don't really quite gauge how that can really affect your life until like you're 40 and you're having a midlife crisis.
There's some unanswered trauma from your past.
Unanswered trauma. Do you guys feel like you guys have any unanswered trauma?
Oh, for sure, lots of that. Where do we begin? It all started on the day I was born.
I was...
Whoa! Hey, is there something we need to talk about?
Pull out pen and paper. How does that make you feel, Joel?
I mean, you don't have to tell us.
No, I was kind of joking. I mean, kind of. I feel like, I don't know, like, when it comes, this is like something even like recently. I feel like I've been learning about myself because I had the time because of like being alone. And it's like looking back on all of like the experiences that I've had in life, right? And like not even realizing that they're traumatic. Like a lot of experiences that I've had. And like, okay, so I work in mental health, or I work in special education, which ties in a lot to mental health. The students that I work with have like therapists, and so I was doing like a trauma training a couple weeks ago, and there's an ACE study, which it's just a study that they did on. It was a really good study. It was a big population sample, and the population was middle-aged, white with like a suitable income. So it was like a standard sample, and it showed that all of the traumatic experiences that people experience in childhood affects their quality of life in the later years and their life expectancy and just quality of life, but mostly life expectancy. And so it's like there's like a certain threshold. If you have like 4 to 7 ACE traumatic experiences, then you're probably like 5 years or like likely to die 5 years earlier than, you know, the average. And it's like a very standard sample of questions, but you know, it's like did you like a whole bunch of just different questions of like your lifestyle growing up. And so like reading that, like most people like have had a traumatic experience in childhood, like most anybody you meet on the street.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting when I was like reading, I was just like, oh, like these different experiences I'm reading about, it's like, okay, like I wouldn't think of this as traumatic per se, just because like it was the norm, not like the norm regularly, but like certain experiences that happen, it's like, oh,
you just don't know
this,
any
better. You don't know any better until like it's retrospect, and it's just like crazy to think about the like pivotal experiences that I've had that have affected
who you are, how you grow
yeah,
up.
and even but especially even the dynamic of the relationships that I have with people. And like it's something like I feel like I'm very like hyper aware of, and I feel a lot of people aren't, or they're just not even aware that the experiences that they had younger were like technically traumatic and like greatly affected the way that they look at the world around them and look at people. Because a lot of times like when children or kids are you know, traumatized in certain ways, like they're hyper aware of everything around them, and everything is a threat to them. And somebody with good intention, you could meet them and have like great intention for them, but they don't know how to trust you. And it completely affects the avenues that they take to like build relationships with people. And
it's
like,
not even because you're a bad person, but it's like a defense mechanism, you know? Like
Yeah.
they push you far away so that they don't let you get close, you know? Because they don't want to break that trust,
yeah.
I didn't mean to...
No, that was it. Like that was all. But I don't know if you guys have anything to say about like
I was going to ask you...
any experiences that like affected
the
dynamic of your relationships or how you built them.
I was going to ask, like, do you... And, you know, you don't have
Yeah,
to share
yeah.
personal experience if you don't want to, but, like, is there... Or maybe with your students, but, yeah, maybe even if you've lived through it, but is there any, like, specific examples that you can think of? Because like it makes sense what you're saying, but
well, first, like, what are the defined traumatic experiences that could be?
I want to look them up, but like we can.
Yeah, I mean, look them up.
Yeah,
Take
I'm
a
gonna look
look
it up.
why
I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna look it up.
We can do some research on the show.
We can do a little research. I just find it interesting
What
because
was it?
I mean, if we do,
A study questionnaire.
if we have like traumatic events when we're younger and we don't even realize what those traumatic events are, like how do we?
How do
know
you heal
if we-
from them?
How do you even know?
How do you? But that's the thing too. And I've like seen it in other people so much. Where, like, I see that I'm talking to them and they tell me certain things and they don't see certain things that they've experienced as traumatic. They like make a joke about it or whatever. And then, you know, it could be me overthinking, but also I do see it where it's like, okay, like you may not even realize how much this has affected you in your adult life and how you present yourself, how you interact with others around you. And it's like, it stems from these experiences that you had growing up. Or that's what I see it as, like at least, like me.
Yeah, like those experiences change and like they it just changes who you are. Like, especially at such a young age, your mind is so malleable. It's like Play-Doh, you know? Both physically, but like metaphorically, you know?
Like, actually.
But
So, can I?
yeah,
so,
please.
The A-Study Adverse Childhood Experiences Questionnaire.
Send that link to us. We'll add it in the description for our viewers too.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, because like this is like something everybody should. I saw such an emotional video of like inmates going through this and realizing that a lot of these experiences that they had growing up affected their decisions and behavior in the adult world. But they have let's see, there's like 10 different sections. Adverse childhood experiences. Prior to your 18th birthday, did you experience? And then it has emotional, physical, sexual, emotional, physical. I'm sorry, those are all abuse. Emotional and physical neglect, domestic violence, family member with addiction, family member with depression or mental illness. So also like imagine all these things can be traumatic experiences. Just people around you having mental health issues.
That is
it is
that's traumatic
when you're
your
thinking,
own growth. Yeah.
Imagine, like and you don't realize it because you may have like a brother that is special education or whatever it may be, have a mental health issue, and you don't think it's really affecting you, but that is something that affects you growing up.
Yes, subconsciously.
Family member incarcerated and a family member with addiction, depression, mental illness. So and then even like when it says like emotional abuse, it's like, did your parent often swear at you, insult you, put you down, humiliate you, things like that? And it's like, these are things like a lot, like most of them, that's another thing, like most of them I'm like, okay, like I didn't experience that, but I know people around me that have, I've seen it, or even a lot of these experiences aren't something that was traumatic to me, but people around me experiencing it.
Yeah.
And that affecting the way that I view the world around me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's heavy stuff.
That is pretty heavy to think about, because I mean, it just made me think back to my childhood. I'm just like, did I have traumatic experiences at one point? And some of them, you grow up and you're just like, yeah, that's them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's not me, but it affects you regardless.
Yeah.
And I guess being hyper aware about certain things like that.
It's almost like that nature versus nurture concept, where like the nature in this case, like the nature is like who you are as a person, like your personality, like from birth, right? But the nurture aspect would be like as you're growing up, those traumatic experiences kind of, start defining you a little differently than what you like who the person you were born as, and it has an effect. And kind of like at a young age you're just really malleable, and those experiences kind of affect you long term. And it's just what bothers me, kind of like on a side note, but what bothers me is like that I feel like a lot of people that are incarcerated or that do bad things, it's not because they're bad people, but they've just experienced some bad things and no one ever like helped them out. They never learned how to like cope with these things. They didn't even know those traumatic experiences to begin with. And then, all of a sudden there's like negative things come out of it.
That's
It's a little frustrating.
It's interesting to think about, just because like generations before generations, they don't think about that stuff. They never thought about that stuff, and like that's all with the social, I guess, mental progression of like the current age. When I think about it, it's it's cool. It's cool, but like it makes you reflect a little bit. Makes you reflect.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I've encountered people that have grown up in traumatizing homes, and they're now very much addressing those things in adulthood.
Yeah.
Which is like, obvious to say it affected them, but it's cool to see that they're not 40 and being affected at that point, what I'm saying? Also like midlife kind of crisis things where you push those to the side rather than engaging and addressing them,
Yeah. And I feel like everybody has to face those kind of things at some point, no matter how much you push it off. Like, you know, everybody knows kind of the things that they need to face in order to grow or even get closure in situations.
Yeah, it's frustrating, like that, you know, mental health, if you like want to work on it or whatever, it's seen as a weakness, whereas like physical health, people are like, oh, you're sick, you know, you caught the flu, you'll see the doctor, you'll be fine, you know, like it's a given and expected, like, yeah, we should go to the doctor, whereas like if someone's sad, it's like, you know, you're being too over dramatic, like, it's like, no, like this, you know, this is eating away at me, it's like, you know.
Yeah, I think our generation's like on the forefront of trying to destigmatize mental health, and like you see it now, but it also, I feel like, you know, it is 2020 and it's like, man, we're kind of late we're very late in destigmatizing you know, the mental health,
considering how far we've come. Yeah,
I'm just sad that we don't have flying cars yet. Not to be nonsensical, but
no, dude, you're totally right. I mean, Back to the Future lied to us. You know, like I might.
They do have the self-tying shoes.
Oh yeah.
So that's like a plus for humanity.
that's like a W.
I give him a slight break, you know. But the hoverboard, dude, that's what I'm after, man. Like, and I skate, and like I don't have a hoverboard yet. And I'm not talking about the one with 2 wheels, and like you're just like, no, it floats.
That's my dream, to be like Static Shock.
So, but yeah, man, relationships, they're interesting. There's something
sticky.
Yeah. But
They are sticky.
yeah, but
They're binding and they're dividing. That's what, it's like mitosis.
But yeah, I don't know. There is one topic. We'll have to save it for part 2 of this episode if there is a part 2. But we were talking about relationships today and stuff. But I want to explore the concept of like open relationships.
I was just having a conversation with some friends about this, of like polygamy and their views on it, and entanglements. I'm just talking. I had to. I literally had to. But like, I know it's way too soon.
It ain't even too soon.
I'm messing around, but I mean, we could get into it. I don't know. Maybe we don't have the time, but.
I mean,
No, we'll have to save it for our next one because I feel like it's a can of worms. It's like a Pandora's box once we start
I
talking
know.
about it.
There's a lot of things that like I wanted to bring up. I'm like, that's gonna just lead down a long
that's a
path of conversation. Like,
well,
like one thing that's interesting to me, I've always found interesting. Like, look it up when you get some time. Is like the triangular love theory, and it's like there's the different types of love. It's like I learned in psychology, but different types of love and the aspects that create these different types of love. So they have like empty love, infatuation, passionate love, and like look at like I will talk about it, but that's one thing I always found interesting. Like has a lot to do with like romantic relationships.
yeah.
And it's interesting like the dynamic you can have when it comes to a romantic partner of being passionate toward them or more loyal to them, or you know you're just. You know, that's like what empty love was of, like, that's like mostly older people after they've had their journey together and they're just kind of together even though there's no like passion or intimacy.
Right. Like just to be together.
But yeah, it's like kind of like, it's called empty love, but it's like only the loyalty's there.
Yeah.
But, and then like all consuming love was like passion, intimacy, and commitment, all 3 of those aspects together. But like that's something that's so interesting to me, and like, it's just so interesting, the different dynamic of relationship you can have with different people. And a lot of it has to do with like people's temperaments and like how well you can just get along with that person and in every way of the word, you know?
yeah.
It's just,
Well, that will definitely have to be
Yeah, no, it
the next subject.
sounds to me like we're gonna have to have a part 2 of the relationship episode.
can make it happen.
We'll have a part 2 where we dive a little deeper in open relationships, romantic relationships,
Open
and
entanglements.
entanglements. Never forget. Never forget.
On the next time on Tea Time.
Next time on Tea Time. We're gonna get into an entanglement, baby.
Yeah, we might get tangled up in this triangle. What? I didn't say that.
Love triangles.
Hey, we all need a little bit of love, right? But anyway. He's like,
I don't know about that one.
Maybe. Well, thanks for coming on, Joel. We're gonna have to have you back again. You know.
yeah. No,
Of course.
We're gonna have to have you back for this, entanglement that we're gonna get into.
No, I love to.
The triangle, we wouldn't be complete with the third,
Thank you guys for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
No,
It's crazy too. I feel like there's a lot to it, and there's a lot more that could be talked about. But
yeah.
I really enjoyed it talking to you guys. And
Of course, well, we enjoyed having you as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's good seeing you again.
yeah, of course, man. It's appreciated. Thanks for having me.
Of course, our pleasure. Our pleasure.
All right, folks. Well,
That wraps it up for today, I think.
Catch
that's
you guys.
the tea time.
Yeah.
Catch you later.
Peace out. Stay up.
Stay up.
イタチ最後に約束しろ。
分かってるわ。